Have you ever wondered when it was that the apostles became priests? When I became a priest, there was a big ordination ceremony. Everybody gathered around here, and I prostrated myself, and then the bishop anointed me with oil, and then he laid his hands on me, and that's when it happened. But it's not so clear with the apostles. And maybe we think, oh, well, it's over time that they discovered that they were priests, or the later church thought, yeah, that's when they became priests, but they didn't really realize that they were priests. But actually, it happened at the Last Supper. And what we're reading tonight in the Gospel is the 17th chapter of St. John, and it's called the High Priestly Prayer. Jesus' High Priestly Prayer, because Jesus is the High Priest. And it's very similar. It kind of matches, it kind of parallels the prayer that the high priest would make once a year at the Feast of the Atonement. On the Feast of the Atonement, the high priest, the Jewish high priest, would enter into the Holy of Holies and offer sacrifice before the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God. And he would pray for three things. He would pray for himself, he would pray for the other priests, and he would pray for the people of God. Those three things. And then he would come out and he'd pronounce the name that couldn't be pronounced by any Jew except for this one time, once in the year. He would pronounce the holy name of God 3 times on that great feast. And Jesus' prayer in Matthew 7, in John 17 matches that, because it begins. In fact, we do hear the prayer, the whole of John 17, but the first part was last year. This is the second part, and the third part we'll hear next year. And so the first part begins. It's a prayer for him. So, Father, glorify your Son, he says, that your Son may glorify you. And so it goes on like that for the first part. And now we're into the second part, and he's praying for the other priests. He's praying for the apostles here. And as part of this prayer, he at the end we've heard, consecrate them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. And for their sake, I consecrate myself so that they too may be consecrated in the truth. And so he's talking about consecration. What's this all about? Consecration. And what has this got to do with anything at all? But when Jesus is speaking about consecration, he's using the same language as the Old Testament. He's using the same language as in Exodus when the Lord commanded Aaron, Moses, to consecrate the sons of Aaron, to make them priests. I forgot to bring my Bible out with all the markings, so I could have quoted you the text. But Exodus 29, he says, this is what you're to do when you consecrate the sons of Aaron as priests. And so Jesus is using the same language as the Old Testament for the consecration of priests here with Exodus. What else have we got to connect with that? Well, we've got the first reading as well. So I'm talking about priesthood. Priesthood is important because guess who are priests? I'm a priest. The bishop is a priest. Who else is priests? Who else is priests? Yeah. You're priests. You're priests. You're priests. You are priests. You are all priests. So this is not just theological for Father Keith because he's a priest. What I'm saying here also applies to you, though I'm just talking right now very specifically of the apostles. So the apostles, we've got Peter here. Peter in the first reading, they say sometime later, we don't know exactly when it happened, he says something strange. Of course, Judas was one of the 12 apostles. He betrayed Jesus. And now he takes, for some reason, he says, we've got to find a replacement for Jesus, for Judas. And he quotes the psalm, the book of Psalms says, let someone else take his office. So it doesn't sound like a very strong argument to me. I've always read this and thought, well, okay. Maybe he could have picked any passage that would have mentioned this. But he's quoting Psalm, I think, 109 here. And two things about this psalm. One is the psalm itself is connected very much to the suffering and death of Jesus and speaks about the one who betrays the person described in the psalm. And it says, let someone else take his office. So it seems to be very much connected with the suffering and death of Jesus and one who betrays Jesus. That's Psalm 109. Also, it speaks about an office. Interesting, an office. In the Greek, the word office that they've translated here is episkopoi. Episcopacy, we use it for bishop. Let somebody else take his bishopric or his episcopacy. And then Peter says they choose two people that could be good candidates, Matthias and the other chap, Barsabbas, I think his name is, and they throw lots. It's just like, okay, we're gonna do some gambling. Let's flip a coin. It's just like, let's flip a coin, see who gets the, and we might think that, cast lots, flip a coin, see who gets it. Is it Matthias or is it this other chap, Justus? And they're not flipping a coin. When they cast lots, they're doing something that goes all the way back to the Old Testament. And it's connected with the priesthood again. Because in the time of David, the sons of Aaron were given their office. They were delegated their office by lots. Lots were cast for them to decide which office they were to use. And so Peter here is using lots. He's speaking about office, and it's clear that he understands himself and the apostles as priests. Priests of the New Testament, priests of the New Covenant. Jesus is consecrating them as priests. To consecrate, when he consecrates somebody, the word consecrate means to make holy. It means to sanctify. It means to set aside for a purpose, for a task, for something. Not a set aside away from something, but for something. And so you and I, we've been consecrated. We'll get into that just now. And so Jesus is saying, the words he uses, consecrate them in the truth. Your word is truth. The truth, the word, aren't things. The truth and the word are a person. Consecrate them in the truth. Your word, Jesus is saying, me is the truth. Consecrate them in me. Set them aside, put them apart, not just for, but in me. The altar here is consecrated, it's set aside. This altar is only used for Mass. It's just used for Mass. That's it. It's set aside for the purpose of celebrating the liturgy, the Eucharist. That's it. This vestment here is consecrated in a sense because it's not used for anything else but the celebration of Mass. It's set aside for that purpose. And it's set aside for this, but Jesus is saying, consecrate them in this. Consecrate them, set them aside in the truth. Consecrate them in the truth, in me. And he wants to consecrate the apostles and also us too. So how is he going to do that? For their sake, I consecrate myself so that they may be consecrated in the truth. I want to consecrate you in the truth, in me. So first of all, I must consecrate myself. I must set myself apart. I must sanctify myself. And that he does that here, as he offers himself as the sacrifice. He gives himself to us on the cross. God is love. Greater love has no one than to lay down his life for his friends. He gives out of love himself. He consecrates himself for us on the cross, so that we can be consecrated in him. How, oh how are we consecrated? How, oh how are we Christians consecrated to the Lord? How are we set aside? How are we sanctified by the Lord? How does he do this? How do we enter into that? Because that's what he wants us to do. He wants us to enter into that, his death and resurrection. He does this through baptism. In your baptism, in my baptism, we enter into the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We enter into the waters, the life-giving waters of the Spirit. He gives us his very life so that he dwells in us and we dwell in him. This is the Spirit who unites us. This is the Spirit who empowers us. When we enter into baptism, we share everything. We enter into his death. We share in his death. We share in his resurrection. We share in everything that is Jesus. And Jesus is the high priest. And so we become high priests. Father, that's really, really not very exciting at all. So what? Your priesthood job doesn't sound very interesting. So why should I be bothered about being a priest in any stretch of the imagination? I'm an engineer, I'm this, that, and the other. So what's the big fuss about being a priest? What does a priest do? The priest offers sacrifice. He intercedes. So Jesus offers sacrifice. He offers himself. This is the greatest sacrifice that could be offered on behalf of the world. That sacrifice saves you and me. That sacrifice enables us to enter into heaven. That sacrifice unites us with God so that we can have an intimate personal relationship. That sacrifice that you and I enter into, that's the priestly sacrifice that you and I share in, so that we too, you and I, can offer sacrifice, unite ourselves with this sacrifice. Our sacrifice is worth hardly anything. Compared to that, it's nothing. But when we offer our little sacrifice, my little me, that seems to be worthless, that seems to be a nothing compared to other people, compared to whoever it might be, when I offer my little, my 5 loaves and 2 fish, which is nothing for 5,000, when I offer my tepid water, when I offer it to him, he makes it more than enough for 5,000. He makes it into the best of wines. He gives it a power that we cannot imagine, so that now your prayer and my prayer has power. Now you and I can speak with power. We can bring his word, his light, his truth into the world which doesn't want to know, and it will be transformative. This is a gift, folks. It's a gift not necessarily for ourselves, but for others. I guess it's difficult for us to grasp fully, and it's only by the Holy Spirit who enlightens us that we can begin to live the power of this. That's why we need Pentecost. That's why we need the Holy Spirit. That's why in these days running up to Pentecost, we need to be asking the Lord to fill us with his Holy Spirit, to fill us with his power from on high, so that we can enter into this, so that we can really be true priests for the Lord, for our brothers and sisters, for the world.